When did you get roped into a scandal? I was studying in the library when I saw my best friend Brenda kissing someone who definitely wasn't her boyfriend in the back corner. Holy moly, I whispered to myself. Brenda was supposed to be at her sorority meeting. Instead, she was pressed against the study room wall with Carlos Dominguez, her lab partner she always complained about. Her boyfriend Terrence was at football practice, completely unaware that his girlfriend of 3 years was making out with another guy. I ducked behind a bookshelf, my heart pounding. Brenda and I had been best friends since freshman year. She'd been with Terrence even longer. They were the couple everyone envied. High school sweethearts who actually lasted. Over the next week, I saw them together twice more. Brenda would tell Terrence she was studying or at Greek events, but I'd spot her with Carlos at the campus coffee shop or walking through the quad. Each time they looked more comfortable together, more like a real couple. You okay? You've been quiet, Brenda asked at our weekly brunch. I pushed eggs around my plate, unable to look at her. She kept talking about Terrence's upcoming birthday and the surprise party she was planning. All I could think about was her hands in Carlos's hair in the library. Seriously, what's wrong? Nothing. Just stressed about midterms. She reached over and squeezed my hand. You know you can tell me anything, right? Best friends forever? I wanted to scream. How could she sit there pretending everything was normal while betraying Terrence? He didn't deserve this. Nobody did. But calling her out would destroy our friendship and their relationship. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. Brenda asked me to cover for her, saying she needed to study late at the library and might crash at my place. But I knew she was with Carlos. I'd seen her getting into his car an hour earlier. Terrence texted me around midnight asking if Brenda was with me. She wasn't answering her phone and he was worried. I stared at the message for 20 minutes, wrestling with my conscience. Brenda was my best friend, but this was wrong. She's not here. I haven't seen her since this afternoon. It wasn't technically a lie. Terrence called immediately, voice tight with concern. Where is she? Is she okay? Should I call campus security? Terrence, I need to tell you something. The words spilled out before I could control them. The library, the coffee shop, Carlos Dominguez, how long it had been going on, how she'd been lying. Silence stretched on the other end until I thought he'd hung up. Are you sure? I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner. He thanked me quietly and ended the call. I threw up afterward, knowing I'd just destroyed my best friend's relationship and our friendship in one conversation. But Terrence deserved the truth. Brenda showed up at my door the next morning, mascara smeared and fury in her eyes. You told Terrence? You actually told Terrence? You were cheating on him, Brenda, for weeks. That wasn't your secret to tell. You're supposed to be my best friend. She called me every name imaginable. Suddenly, Terrence reached out to me with a simple text asking if we could talk. I met him at a quiet coffee shop off campus, nervous about what he might say. He looked tired but somehow lighter, like a weight had lifted. I wanted to thank you for telling me. I'm sorry I waited so long. You were in an impossible position. I get it. We talked for an hour about everything except Brenda. He was transferring next semester, starting fresh somewhere new. He seemed genuinely grateful if still hurt. As we got up to leave, he paused by the door. Can I ask you something? Why did you tell me? Really? Because you deserved better. You deserved honesty. He studied my face for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression. A recognition or realization I couldn't read. Then he stepped forward, one hand gently cupping my face and kissed me softly. I pulled back in shock. Terrence, what? I've wondered for 3 years what that would feel like. If things had been different, if I'd met you first? He smiled sadly. Maybe I was with the wrong best friend all along. Then in the corner of my eye, I saw Brenda walk into the shop recording on her phone. My whole body went cold and I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think as Brenda stood there with her phone raised and pointed right at us. The coffee shop fell dead quiet and I could feel everyone turning to stare at what was happening. A customer at the next table actually put down their laptop to watch. The barista stopped mid-pour with the milk pitcher still in her hand. Brenda's face was twisted with rage and triumph at the same time, like she'd just caught us doing something way worse than what actually happened. Her hand shook a little, but she kept that phone steady, making sure she got everything on camera. You backstabbing piece of trash. Brenda's voice filled the whole shop and made people at the back tables stand up to see better. She pointed at me with her free hand while keeping the phone recording with the other. I knew it. I knew you wanted him the whole time. The second we break up, you're all over him. My mouth opened, but no words came out. Terrence stepped forward and raised his hands, trying to calm her down, but she backed away and kept recording. This is Rich! My supposed best friend couldn't even wait 24 hours before making her move. More customers pulled out their phones and started recording too. The manager came out from behind the counter looking stressed and approached us carefully. I'm going to need you all to leave, he said in a low voice. You're disturbing our other customers. Terrence tried to explain that this wasn't what it looked like, but Brenda just got louder. Oh, please, I have it all on video. The kiss, the guilty looks, everything. She made sure to pan the camera around to catch the whole scene, including the other customers watching. The manager's face got firm and he pointed to the door. Out, now, all of you. We had no choice but to head for the exit with Brenda walking backwards, still recording and narrating for her video. This is what fake friends do, everyone. They pretend to care about you, then steal your boyfriend. The cold air hit my face as we stumbled outside onto the sidewalk. Brenda finally lowered her phone and tapped the screen a few times, probably saving the video. She looked between Terrence and me with pure disgust on her face. Without another word, she spun around and marched to her car parked across the street. She slammed the door so hard the whole car shook and peeled out of the parking spot without checking for traffic. A passing car had to slam on their brakes to avoid hitting her. Terrence and I stood there on the sidewalk not knowing what to say or do. My hands were shaking and I felt like I might throw up right there on the concrete. "She's going to post that," I finally managed to say. Terrence ran his hand through his hair and looked as shocked as I felt. We both knew what was coming next. I didn't even make it back to my dorm before my phone started going crazy. The first notification popped up while I was still walking across campus. Then another, then 5 more, then 20. My group chat was blowing up with people sending the video link. Instagram stories were already resharing it. Someone had already posted it to our campus Facebook page with the caption Brenda wrote, "Caught my best friend with my boyfriend." Some people have no shame. There was zero mention of her cheating with Carlos for weeks. My phone vibrated nonstop as message after message poured in. Some people were calling me horrible names and saying they couldn't believe I'd do something like that. Others were asking what really happened because they knew something didn't add up. A few people from my classes who barely knew me were suddenly messaging to get the gossip. Each notification made my stomach twist tighter. I tried to call Brenda to explain or at least ask her to take the video down, but when I hit her contact, it went straight to a message saying the number wasn't available. She'd already blocked me everywhere. A text from Terrence came through in the middle of all the chaos. "I'm so sorry about the kiss. I shouldn't have done that. I made everything worse." I wanted to respond but didn't know what to say. Everything was falling apart so fast. By the time I got to my dorm room, I was practically running just to get away from people staring at me. Some girls in the lobby had the video playing on someone's phone and went quiet when I walked past. I could hear them whispering as soon as the door closed behind me. I made it to my room and collapsed on my bed, finally letting the tears come. That's where Amy found me about 10 minutes later, curled up on my comforter with mascara running down my face. She sat down next to me and rubbed my back without saying anything at first. When I could finally talk, I told her everything from the very beginning. About seeing Brenda with Carlos in the library weeks ago. About watching them together multiple times. About Brenda asking me to lie for her. About telling Terrence the truth. About the coffee shop meeting and the kiss. And Brenda walking in at the worst possible moment. Amy listened to the whole story while handing me tissues from the box on my nightstand. She didn't interrupt or judge, just let me get it all out. When I finished, she helped me sit up and looked me straight in the eye. "Okay, we need to figure out what you're going to do about this," she said in her practical way. We went through the options one by one. I could post my own version of events and try to set the record straight, but that might look defensive. I could stay quiet and let it blow over, but the damage might already be too deep. I could try to talk to people individually and explain what really happened, but that would take forever and might not work. Every choice felt impossible with the video already spreading like wildfire across campus. That night was one of the longest of my life. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling and checking my phone every few minutes even though I knew I shouldn't. The video had hundreds of views already, and the comments kept getting worse. Most people were taking Brenda's side because she posted first and controlled the story. Someone commented that they always knew I was shady. Another person said I was the worst kind of friend. A girl from Brenda's sorority wrote that she wasn't surprised because I'd always seemed jealous of Brenda's relationship. Each comment felt like a punch to the gut. I kept refreshing the page, watching the numbers climb higher and higher, unable to stop even though it was making me feel worse. My alarm went off at 7, but I turned it off and pulled the covers over my head. There was no way I could walk across campus to my morning psych class with everyone staring and whispering about that video. I stayed in bed for another hour, scrolling through more comments until Amy knocked on my door carrying a tray from the dining hall. She'd brought scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice, and even grabbed one of those chocolate muffins I liked. She sat on the edge of my bed and pushed the tray toward me. "You need to eat something and you can't hide forever." I picked at the eggs while she talked about how the drama would die down once something new happened. She was trying to help, but we both knew this wasn't going away anytime soon. After Amy left for her own classes, I finally checked my actual messages instead of just the public comments. Mixed in with all the hate and gossip requests was one that stood out. Vienna Carter from Brenda's sorority had sent a long message saying she needed to talk to me about what really happened. She said the whole thing was causing problems in their chapter, and she wanted to hear my side before their next meeting. I stared at her message for a while, wondering if it was some kind of trap. Vienna had always seemed nice enough when I'd seen her at parties with Brenda, but I didn't really know her. She suggested meeting at the quiet coffee place near the science buildings where nobody from Greek Row usually went. I agreed to meet her that afternoon, even though my stomach was in knots about it. When I got there, Vienna was already waiting in a back corner booth with 2 cups of tea. She looked tired and stressed as she waved me over. I sat down across from her and she pushed one of the cups toward me. "Thanks for coming. I know this must be hard." I told her everything from the beginning. The library, seeing them together multiple times, Brenda asking me to lie, telling Terrence, the coffee shop meeting, and the kiss that Brenda recorded. Vienna listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or frowning at certain parts. When I finished, she leaned back and rubbed her temples. I suspected something was off when Brenda posted that video. She's been acting weird for weeks and now it makes sense. She explained that several girls in the sorority had noticed Brenda disappearing during events and lying about where she'd been. Vienna warned me that Greek life gossip spread faster than wildfire, and this was probably going to get worse before it got better. She said she'd try to get the other officers to stay neutral, but couldn't control what individual sisters did. If Brenda ever wants to actually talk this through instead of just posting videos, I can help set up a mediation. We've done it before with other conflicts. I thanked her, but doubted Brenda would ever agree to that. As we were leaving, Vienna touched my arm and said she was sorry I got caught in the middle of all this. Back in my room, I found a text from Terrence asking if I was okay. He said people were sending him nasty messages calling him a player who immediately moved on to his ex's best friend. He felt terrible about the kiss, and how it made everything worse. We texted back and forth for a bit and agreed to keep our distance for now to avoid adding fuel to the fire. Neither of us wanted to make things worse than they already were. I forced myself to go to my afternoon chemistry class even though Carlos was in it. My legs felt like jelly walking into the lecture hall knowing he'd be there. Sure enough, he was already in his usual spot in the middle section. The second he saw me, he grabbed his stuff and moved to a seat in the back corner as far from me as possible. He kept his head down the entire class and practically ran out when it ended. I was packing up my notes when a group of Brenda's sorority sisters walked past my row. They all turned to stare at me with cold expressions. One of them said, "Homewrecker," just loud enough for me to hear. The others giggled as they kept walking. My face burned, but I kept my head up and walked out without responding. That evening, I looked up the campus counseling center website and filled out their online request form. The stress was making it impossible to focus on studying or anything else. They emailed back within an hour saying they'd scheduled me with someone named Alan Green for Thursday afternoon. I'd never been to counseling before, but figured I needed help dealing with all this. The next day, I was sitting alone in the dining hall trying to eat lunch when Jacob Whitney walked up to my table. He was one of Terrence's teammates on the football team, a big guy who usually hung out with the other players. He asked if he could sit down, and I nodded even though I was confused why he wanted to talk to me. Terrence told the team what really happened. Most of us think Brenda's being manipulative with that video. He said the guys were angry that she was trying to destroy my reputation when she was the one who cheated. Jacob picked at the label on his water bottle for a moment before continuing. There's something else you should know. Carlos has been bragging in the locker room about hooking up with Brenda, acting like he's some big player who got the hottest girl on campus. My hands clenched into fists under the table. Carlos was treating her like some conquest to brag about while she was destroying my life to protect their affair. Jacob said Carlos had been going into detail about their hookups, and making it sound like Brenda was just another girl on his list. The other guys thought it was gross, but Carlos didn't care. After Jacob left, I sat there feeling angrier than I'd been since this whole thing started. Brenda was ruining my reputation to protect someone who was treating her like a trophy to show off to his buddies. Part of me wanted to tell her what Carlos was saying, but I knew she'd just think I was trying to break them up out of jealousy. The unfairness of it all made me want to scream. I grabbed my backpack and headed back to my room to study for my biology test. My textbook was open on my desk, but I kept checking my phone every few minutes. The video had over 300 comments now, and more kept coming. Some people were calling me names, but others were starting to ask questions about the timeline. One girl from my English class wrote that she'd seen Brenda with Carlos weeks ago at the mall. Another person said they heard Brenda was the one who cheated first. I tried to focus on mitosis and cell division, but the words kept blurring together. My phone buzzed with another notification, and I couldn't help checking it. Amy walked in around 6 and found me staring at my phone instead of studying. She grabbed it from my hands and put it in her desk drawer. "That's enough. You need a break from all this." She pulled me up from my chair and grabbed her car keys. We drove 20 minutes to a small Italian place in the next town where nobody from campus would be. The waitress didn't know us and nobody stared when we walked in. I ordered chicken parmesan and actually finished most of it. Amy talked about her art project and her new boyfriend and anything except the drama on campus. For an hour, I felt almost normal again. We got back to the dorm around 9 and I was planning to finally study when I saw Brenda had posted another Instagram story. She'd put together a whole slideshow of old photos of us from freshman year. Pictures from our first party together and spring break and late-night study sessions. The caption said, "This is who I thought was my best friend before she went after my boyfriend." My stomach twisted looking at those happy memories being used as weapons. I opened a new post and started typing my side of the story. I explained about seeing her with Carlos and how she asked me to lie for her. I wrote about the impossible position she put me in and how Terrence deserved to know the truth. My finger hovered over the post button for 5 minutes. Then I selected all the text and deleted it. Getting into a social media war would just make me look guilty and defensive. People would believe what they wanted to believe anyway. Thursday afternoon, I walked to the counseling center for my appointment. Alan Green turned out to be a middle-aged guy with kind eyes and a calm voice. He listened without interrupting while I told him everything from the beginning. When I finished, he handed me a tissue box even though I hadn't realized I was crying. "You did the right thing telling Terrence. Keeping that secret was hurting you." We talked about the guilt I felt for betraying Brenda's trust, even though she was the one cheating. Alan helped me see that telling the truth wasn't the same as causing the problem. Brenda's choices created the situation, and I just refused to be part of the lie anymore. You can't control what other people think or how they react. Focus on what you can control. He pulled out a worksheet and we made a list of things within my power. How I responded to people and whether I engaged with the drama and taking care of my own mental health. We scheduled weekly sessions for the rest of the semester. Walking out, I felt lighter even though nothing had actually changed. Friday morning, I was heading to the library when I saw Terrence at one of the study tables. He waved me over and I sat down across from him. I wanted to tell you I'm definitely transferring to state next semester. My chest felt tight hearing it out loud even though I already knew. He said his credits would transfer and he could start fresh where nobody knew about all this drama. I told him I understood and that it was probably the right choice. We sat there for a moment not knowing what else to say. Take care of yourself, he said as he gathered his books. I watched him walk away and felt sad about how everything had fallen apart. That afternoon, Vienna texted me while I was in the dining hall. Brenda's having a rough time. Sisters are sick of the drama. She said some of the girls knew about Carlos before the video and thought Brenda was being a hypocrite. The sorority president had told her to stop posting about it because it was making their whole chapter look bad. Vienna said Brenda had been crying in her room and skipping chapter meetings. Part of me felt bad for her, but mostly I was just tired of it all. Saturday morning, I opened my email and saw a message from my academic advisor with the subject line, "Concerning your grades." She'd noticed I'd failed my last chemistry quiz and missed 2 homework assignments. We needed to meet to discuss strategies before I fell too far behind. I scheduled an appointment for Monday and spent the weekend trying to catch up on all the work I'd been ignoring. Monday's chemistry class was in a big lecture hall, so I thought I could avoid Carlos easily. I sat in the back corner and took notes without looking up. When class ended, I packed slowly to let everyone else leave first. I was almost at the door when Carlos stepped in front of me. "You ruined everything. Brenda won't even talk to me now because of you." His face was red and his hands were clenched at his sides. I stepped around him without saying anything, but he grabbed my arm. "This is all your fault." I pulled my arm free and looked him straight in the eyes. "That's not my problem." I walked out before he could say anything else. My hands were shaking as I headed to my advisor's office, but I was proud of myself for not engaging with his drama. Tuesday morning, I was scrolling through Instagram when I saw a new account called Campus Tea had posted something about Brenda. The post showed screenshots of her and Carlos at some party 3 weeks before she and Terrence broke up. Someone had circled them in the background of multiple photos where they were standing way too close and touching each other. The account had over 200 followers already, and people were commenting things like, "Knew she was shady," and "Poor Terrence." I clicked through more posts and found timestamps showing Brenda had been lying about her whereabouts for at least a month. The receipts were clear and damning with dates and locations that matched times she'd told Terrence she was studying. My phone buzzed with a text from Brenda for the first time since the coffee shop incident. "I know you're behind that Instagram account. Take it down now, or I'm reporting you to campus security for harassment." I typed back that I wasn't running any accounts and maybe she should think about how many people knew the truth about her and Carlos. She sent 5 more angry texts calling me names and threatening to tell everyone I was obsessed with Terrence. I blocked her number and went to my appointment with my academic advisor. Professor Martinez looked at my grades on her computer screen and frowned at the recent drop in my chemistry and biology scores. She asked if something was going on personally that was affecting my studies. I explained about the social situation without going into too much detail. She nodded and pulled up the tutoring center website to book me sessions for both classes. Then she emailed my professors requesting 2-week extensions on my upcoming assignments due to personal circumstances. She printed out a schedule of study groups and highlighted the ones that would help most with my weak areas. Walking to counseling that afternoon, I felt nervous about what Alan would say about the latest drama. He had me sit in the comfortable chair and asked how the week had been since our last session. I told him about Carlos grabbing me and the Instagram account and Brenda's angry texts. He pulled out a worksheet about setting boundaries, and we practiced different responses I could use when people confronted me. We role-played scenarios where someone accused me of being a homewrecker, and I practiced staying calm and not defending myself. Alan reminded me that I didn't owe anyone an explanation and could simply walk away from confrontations. We worked on breathing exercises to use when I felt my anxiety rising in social situations. He had me write down 3 boundaries I wanted to maintain, and we discussed specific ways to enforce them. Thursday at lunch, I ran into Jacob near the athletic center and he waved me over to talk. "Terrence told Carlos to stop spreading lies about you at practice yesterday. He said Carlos had been telling the team I'd been trying to break up Terrence and Brenda for months. Terrence had pulled him aside after practice and told him to shut up about things he didn't understand. Jacob said Carlos backed down immediately when Terrence confronted him directly without any fighting or drama. The team was mostly on Terrence's side since they'd known him longer and trusted his version of events. I thanked Jacob for letting me know, and he said he'd keep an eye on things at practice. That evening, Amy noticed I'd been eating dinner at weird times to avoid the dining hall crowds. She adjusted her schedule without me asking so we could eat together at less busy times. We found a quiet corner table at 6:30 when most people were at club meetings or sports practice. Amy brought her laptop and we studied while we ate, so it looked like we were just focused on work. She never made a big deal about it, but I knew she was protecting me from having to eat alone. Friday afternoon, Vienna sent me a long text saying Brenda wanted to meet with a campus mediator to discuss everything. She said Brenda was willing to have a neutral third party help them work through the situation. I stared at the message for 10 minutes before responding that I'd consider it if the mediator was truly neutral. Vienna gave me the contact information for the campus conflict resolution office and said they had trained peer mediators. I made an appointment for the following week, even though my stomach hurt thinking about sitting across from Brenda. Monday, I met with Alan to prepare for the mediation session scheduled for Wednesday afternoon. He had me write down what I wanted from the conversation and what my limits were for the discussion. We identified that I wanted Brenda to acknowledge her role in creating this situation and stop spreading lies about me. My boundaries included not accepting blame for her cheating and not discussing my conversation with Terrence at the coffee shop. Alan helped me practice staying calm when Brenda would likely say hurtful things during the meeting. We went over techniques for not getting pulled into arguments and keeping focused on resolution rather than revenge. He reminded me that mediation wasn't about winning, but about finding a way to coexist on campus peacefully. Wednesday at 2 o'clock, I walked into the neutral campus office where the mediation would happen. The peer mediator introduced herself as Sarah and explained the ground rules about respectful communication and taking turns speaking. Brenda was already sitting at the round table looking angry with her arms crossed over her chest. Sarah asked Brenda to start by explaining how she felt about the situation without attacking anyone personally. "I feel completely betrayed by someone I trusted with everything." Brenda's voice was shaking as she spoke. She went on about how I'd violated our friendship by telling her private business to Terrence. Sarah turned to me and asked me to explain my perspective on what had happened. I took a deep breath and calmly described the position Brenda had put me in by asking me to lie. I explained how uncomfortable I'd been knowing about the cheating while Terrence was deceived for weeks. Sarah asked clarifying questions and helped us both see how our actions had affected each other. After an hour of back and forth with Sarah guiding us, Brenda finally said something unexpected. "I know asking you to cover for me was wrong." She was looking at the table instead of at me. She admitted she'd put me in an impossible situation by making me lie to Terrence when he called that night. She was still angry that I'd told him everything, but she understood that she'd created the whole mess with her choices. Sarah asked what we both wanted moving forward since we'd have to see each other on campus for the rest of the year. I straightened in my chair and said I wanted us to stop attacking each other publicly and just be civil when we crossed paths. Brenda nodded slowly and agreed that the drama had gotten out of hand, and she was tired of it too. Sarah wrote down our agreement that we'd acknowledge each other politely on campus, but wouldn't seek out interaction or spread more gossip about the situation. We both signed the mediation form that outlined these boundaries and promised not to involve other people in our conflict anymore. Sarah reminded us that breaking this agreement could result in disciplinary action from the Student Conduct Office. My hands were shaking as I gathered my things and walked out of the office first, while Brenda stayed behind to talk to Sarah privately. The hallway felt too bright after the dim mediation room, and I had to lean against the wall for a moment to steady myself. My phone buzzed with a text from Vienna saying she'd heard we'd gone through with the mediation, and she was proud of us for handling it maturely. I walked slowly back to my dorm, feeling completely drained like I'd run a marathon, even though we'd only talked for an hour. Amy was waiting in our room with hot chocolate and immediately pulled me into a hug when she saw my face. Over the next few days, I noticed people weren't staring at me as much in the dining hall or whispering when I walked past. Some new drama about two guys fighting over a parking spot had taken over the campus gossip mill, and suddenly my situation felt like old news. I still caught occasional looks, but the intense scrutiny that had made me skip meals was fading into background noise. 3 days before winter break started, Terrence texted asking if we could meet one more time before he left to visit his new school. I agreed to meet him at the same off-campus coffee shop where everything had exploded with Brenda's video. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee waiting. We talked for almost 2 hours about everything that had happened with more perspective now that some time had passed. He told me about his plans for transferring and how his parents were supportive even though they didn't understand all the details. I shared how the mediation went, and that Brenda and I had agreed to be civil, but our friendship was definitely over. He reached across the table and touched my hand briefly before pulling back. "I need to apologize again for kissing you that day," he said quietly. I shook my head and told him I didn't regret that moment, even though the timing and circumstances made everything more complicated. He smiled sadly and said he'd been thinking about it a lot and wondered what might have happened if we'd met under different circumstances. We both knew there was something there, but also understood that acting on it now would just create more problems for everyone. Before we left, we exchanged new phone numbers since he'd be changing his when he moved. We agreed to stay in touch as friends, but both knew we needed space to heal and figure out our separate paths. The goodbye hug lasted longer than it should have, but neither of us pulled away first. Walking back to campus alone, I felt sad but also relieved that we'd had a chance to talk everything through properly. 2 days later, Vienna mentioned during lunch that she'd heard Carlos and Brenda had ended things after the mediation. Apparently, Brenda had realized Carlos was just using her for fun and had never planned to actually date her seriously. Vienna said Brenda was devastated to lose both Terrence and Carlos within weeks, but was trying to focus on her sorority responsibilities. I felt a tiny bit of sympathy for her, even though she'd caused most of her own problems. With only a week left in the semester, I threw myself into studying for finals and catching up on assignments I'd neglected during the drama. I spent hours in the library working through chemistry problems and attending every tutoring session available. My chemistry grade had dropped dangerously close to failing, but the tutor helped me understand concepts I'd missed while dealing with everything else. I turned in my final paper for English 2 days early and felt confident about my history exam after a marathon study session with classmates. Amy stayed up late with me reviewing flashcards and making sure I took breaks to eat and sleep. She'd become more than just a roommate through all of this, turning into a real friend who had my back no matter what. She introduced me to her friend group from the environmental club, who didn't care about Greek life drama at all. We went to trivia night at the campus pub, and I actually laughed for the first time in weeks when we came in dead last but had fun anyway. These new friends invited me to their end-of-semester potluck and treated me like I'd always been part of their group. One girl named Beth mentioned she'd heard about the video, but thought it was stupid how people blew everything out of proportion. On the last day of classes before finals week, I had my final counseling appointment with Alan for the semester. He smiled when I walked in and commented that I looked stronger and more confident than when we'd first met. We talked about everything I'd learned through this experience and how I'd grown in trusting my own judgment. He pointed out that I'd stood by my decision to tell Terrence the truth, even when facing massive social pressure and backlash. I realized he was right, and that I'd discovered my own moral compass was stronger than my need for social approval. Finals week arrived faster than expected, and I spent most of my time buried in textbooks at the library trying to salvage my grades. On Tuesday morning, I headed to the campus bookstore to grab more index cards for my study notes when I spotted Brenda near the biology section flipping through a review guide. We both froze for a second before making brief eye contact, and I remembered what we'd agreed to in mediation about being civil. She gave me a small nod, which I returned, and then we both went back to our shopping without saying anything. It felt weird, but also kind of okay, like we'd finally accepted where things stood between us. Wednesday was my chemistry final, and I showed up 30 minutes early to review my notes one last time in the hallway. Carlos walked past me without looking over and took a seat in the back corner of the classroom. When the professor handed out the exam, I took a deep breath and started working through each problem carefully, using all the strategies my tutor had taught me. 3 hours later, I walked out knowing I'd nailed it because every equation made sense, and I'd even finished the bonus questions. My phone buzzed with a text from Amy asking how it went, and I sent back 3 party emojis which made her laugh. That afternoon, Vienna caught up with me outside the student union and asked if I had plans for Friday night. She was throwing a small holiday party at her apartment with people from different friend groups, including some grad students and kids from the environmental club. I hesitated for a second, thinking about how Brenda's whole sorority crew might be there, but Vienna quickly added it would just be people who weren't going home early for break. Friday night, I showed up at Vienna's place with cookies I'd bought from the campus bakery and found about 15 people hanging out in her living room. Nobody from Brenda's inner circle was there, and I actually recognized a few faces from Amy's environmental club meetings. We played board games and ate way too much food while swapping stories about our worst finals experiences. One guy told us about accidentally submitting his rough draft instead of his final paper and having to beg his professor for mercy. I laughed harder than I had in months and realized I wasn't thinking about the drama at all anymore. As people started leaving, Vienna pulled me aside and said she was glad I came because she'd been wanting to get to know me better outside of all the mediation stuff. Saturday morning, I packed up my dorm room for winter break, feeling lighter than I had all semester. Amy helped me carry boxes to my car, and we made plans to text over break and maybe meet up if we got bored at home. The campus felt empty already with most students gone, and I took one last walk through the quad thinking about everything that had happened since September. My phone lit up with a notification, and I saw Terrence had posted a photo from his new campus with the caption, "New Beginnings." Sunday afternoon. While doing laundry at home, I got a text from him saying his first day at the new school felt right, and he was already meeting people in his program. I wrote back that I was happy for him and meant it because we'd both handled everything as well as we could given the circumstances. He sent a thumbs up and we left it at that, knowing we both needed space to move forward. Over break, I thought about the whole semester and how losing my friendship with Brenda had actually opened up space for better relationships. Amy had become someone I could really count on, and Vienna turned out to be genuinely cool once I got to know her outside the Greek life bubble. Even Jacob had checked in a few times to make sure I was doing okay, which was more than most people had done. When January rolled around, I actually felt excited to go back to campus instead of dreading it like I thought I would. The whole mess had taught me to trust my gut and stick to my decisions even when everyone else thought I was wrong. Standing in my dorm room unpacking for spring semester, I knew I could handle whatever came next because I'd already survived the worst and come out stronger. That's the end of this story. Thanks for joining me, because sharing it with you really makes it more meaningful. I hope it added a little warmth to your day. Subscribe if you'd like to come back for more.